Captain Jake Morrison stood at the front window of his ship, looking at something that should not exist. The alien ship floating in empty space was huge, much bigger than anything humans had ever built. It was dark and strange, with parts that seemed to move even though nothing was touching them. "How long has it been out there?" Jake asked his science officer, Dr. Lisa Park. Lisa looked at her computer screen and shook her head. "At least 3,000 years, maybe more. But Jake, this thing is not dead. It's giving off more energy than our main reactor." The ship had a name that made every space pilot nervous. They called it the Void Caller. For hundreds of years, different alien races had tried to take it. None had succeeded. Most had died trying. The Zephyrians were the first to try. They were smart aliens who could change their bodies to be perfect for any job. They sent their best engineers and soldiers to take the ship. The Void Caller killed them all. When rescue ships found the Zephyrians floating in space, their minds were completely empty. They could not remember their own names. Next came the Corax Empire. These aliens loved war and had the best weapons in the galaxy. They sent 50 warships to capture the Void Caller. The alien ship destroyed them all in less than 10 minutes. The weapons it used were like nothing anyone had ever seen. They could bend space itself to crush the attacking ships. The Alari tried next. These ancient aliens were so smart that other races thought they were like gods. They had technology that could do impossible things. But even they failed. The Void Caller destroyed 3 of their best ships before they gave up and flew away. 4 other alien races had tried over the years. Pirates, traders, explorers, and scientists. All had failed. All had died or run away. The galactic government had finally put up warning signs around the area. They told everyone to stay away from the dangerous ship. But Jake Morrison was not like most people. He had read every report about the Void Caller. He had talked to the few survivors who had lived through attacks. Something about their stories made him think differently about the alien ship. "Sir," said Lieutenant Dan Cooper from his station, "we're getting messages from the Galactic Council. They want us to leave this area right now." Commander Amy Walsh walked over to stand next to Jake. She had been his second in command for 5 years and knew him well. "Jake, this is crazy. That ship has killed thousands of people. Our insurance won't even cover us if we get too close." Jake kept looking at the Void Caller. Up close, it was even stranger than the pictures showed. Parts of it seemed to fade in and out like a ghost. Other sections looked solid but moved in ways that hurt to watch. "Lisa, tell me about the attacks. How did the ship choose its targets?" Dr. Park pulled up her files and read through them quickly. "That's interesting. The ship doesn't attack randomly, it waits. It studies each ship that comes near it. The Corax came with all weapons ready to fire. The Zephyrians brought boarding ships full of soldiers. The Alari tried to hack into its computer systems from far away." Jake nodded slowly. He was starting to understand something that the other races had missed. "They all came as invaders. What if we tried something different?" Amy looked worried. "Different how?" "Every race that approached that ship wanted to take it by force. They saw it as a prize to be won or a threat to be destroyed. What if we approached it as friends?" Dan Cooper turned around in his chair. "Sir, with respect, that thing has killed entire fleets. I don't think it cares about friendship." But Lisa was looking at her readings with new interest. "Actually, Dan, Jake might be right. Look at this energy pattern. The ship's weapons only turn on when other ships get aggressive. When the Alari tried to hack its systems, the ship fought back. When the Corax aimed their guns, it shot first. Jake made a decision that would change everything."
"Amy, I want you to take the Terra Nova back to safe distance."
"Lisa, Pete, and I are going to take a shuttle and visit our new neighbor." "Jake, no," Amy said quickly. "If something goes wrong, we'll lose our captain and our best science officer." "If we don't try, we'll never know if there was another way," Jake replied. "Besides, I don't think this ship is evil. I think it's lonely." The idea sounded crazy, but Jake had survived 15 years in space by trusting his feelings about things. Something about the Void Caller reminded him of a guard dog. It attacked when people came with bad intentions, but maybe it would be different with friends. Chief Engineer Pete Graham joined them in the shuttle bay. Pete was a big man with gentle hands who could fix anything. He had worked with Jake for 10 years and trusted his captain completely. "So we're really going to knock on the door of the most dangerous ship in the galaxy?" Pete asked as he checked the shuttle's systems. "We're going to try," Jake said. "No weapons, no tricks, no attempts to take anything. We're just going to introduce ourselves." Lisa strapped herself into her seat as they prepared to launch. "If this works, we'll be famous. If it doesn't work, we'll be very dead." The shuttle left the Terra Nova and flew slowly toward the Void Caller. Jake kept their weapons powered down and their shields at minimum power. He wanted the alien ship to know they were not a threat. As they got closer, the Void Caller seemed to notice them. Lights began to glow along its hull. Energy readings spiked on Lisa's instruments. "It's scanning us," she reported. "But Jake, this feels different from the reports. It's not trying to hurt us. It's like it's curious about us." Pete watched his engineering displays with amazement. "The scan is gentle, like it's asking permission instead of just taking what it wants." Suddenly, their radio came to life. No voice spoke, but somehow all three humans understood the message perfectly. The meaning appeared in their minds like their own thoughts. "State your purpose." Jake took a deep breath and spoke into his microphone. "We are explorers from Earth. We came to meet you, not to take anything from you. We want to understand." For a long moment, nothing happened. The Void Caller hung in space like a sleeping giant. Then slowly, a huge door opened in its side. Lights came on inside, showing a docking bay that seemed to reshape itself to fit their small shuttle. "Well," Pete said quietly, "I guess we're invited in." As their shuttle flew into the alien ship, Jake felt like they were about to discover something amazing. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Void Caller had opened its doors to visitors instead of destroying them. The shuttle bay inside the Void Caller was unlike anything the three humans had ever seen. The walls seemed to be alive, flowing like water but solid to the touch. Lights appeared wherever they needed them, as if the ship could read their minds and know what they wanted to see. Jake Morrison stepped out of their shuttle first, followed by Dr. Lisa Park and Chief Engineer Pete Graham. The air inside the alien ship was perfectly safe for humans to breathe. This was another surprise because no other race had reported this happening. "The ship changed its air for us," Lisa said, checking her instruments, the temperature, the pressure, even the mix of gases. "It's exactly what we need." Pete looked around the docking bay with wonder. The walls were covered in patterns that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. "This place is bigger inside than it looked from outside." "That shouldn't be possible." A soft sound made them turn around. A doorway had opened in the wall, though none of them had seen it there before. Beyond the door was a hallway that stretched into the distance, lit by lights that appeared as they walked forward. "Should we go in?" Lisa asked. Jake nodded. "We came this far. Let's see where it leads." They walked down the hallway together, staying close to each other. The walls around them showed pictures that seemed to move like movies. They saw stars being born, planets forming, and strange creatures living in oceans under alien skies. "It's showing us the history of the galaxy," Lisa whispered. "These are real places, real events." The hallway led them to a huge room with a ceiling so high they couldn't see the top. In the center of the room stood a figure made of light. It looked almost human, but taller and somehow more perfect. When it moved, it left traces of light in the air behind it. "Welcome," the figure said in perfect English. "I am the curator. I have been waiting for someone worthy to find me." Jake stepped forward, trying not to show how nervous he felt. "We're from Earth, we're explorers. We mean no harm." The curator smiled, and somehow that simple expression made Jake feel less afraid. "I know what you are, Jake Morrison. I have been watching your species for many years. You are different from the others who have come here." "Different how?" Pete asked. Instead of answering right away, the curator gestured to the walls around them. The moving pictures changed to show the different alien races that had tried to take the ship. They saw Korax warriors preparing for battle, Zephyrian scientists planning to tear the ship apart and study it, and Alari masters trying to control the ship's computer systems. "Each race that found me wanted to use me," the curator explained. "They saw my knowledge and technology as tools to make themselves more powerful. They never asked what I wanted or why I was here." Lisa studied the pictures with fascination. "You're not just a ship, are you? You're a person or something like a person." "I am both," the curator replied. "I am a ship that can think and feel. I am a library that holds the knowledge of my creators. I am a teacher waiting for students who are ready to learn." The pictures on the walls changed again. Now they showed the curator's creators, a race of beings that looked somewhat like the curator itself. They were tall and graceful with technology that seemed like magic. "My people were very advanced," the curator continued. "They could travel between stars as easily as you walk between rooms. They could create life and reshape planets. They thought they were the greatest beings in the universe." "What happened to them?" Jake asked. The curator's expression became sad. "They destroyed themselves. Their knowledge became too great for their wisdom. They created weapons that could destroy entire solar systems. They fought wars that lasted for thousands of years. In the end, there was nothing left but empty worlds and broken dreams. Pete felt a chill run down his spine. And they built you to carry their knowledge? They built me to find a race worthy of their legacy, the curator said. Someone who would use knowledge to create instead of destroy. Someone who could learn from their mistakes. The room around them began to change. The walls showed new pictures, these ones of humanity. They saw human history from the beginning. The good and the bad together. Wars and peace, kindness and cruelty. Discoveries and disasters. Jake watched images of human conflict with a heavy heart. He saw wars that killed millions, pollution that poisoned rivers and air, and species driven to extinction by human carelessness. We've made a lot of mistakes too, he said quietly. Yes, the curator agreed. But you learn from them. That is what makes you different. The pictures changed to show other moments in human history. Scientists sharing their discoveries freely with the world. People risking their lives to save strangers. Nations working together to solve problems that affected everyone. The Koraks saw their history of conquest and felt proud, the curator explained. The Zephyrians saw their genetic experiments and thought they were justified. The Alari saw their superiority over younger races and believed they deserved to rule. And humans? Lisa asked. Humans see their mistakes and try to do better. You are the first species I have met that can look at your own failures honestly and still choose to grow. The curator began walking toward another door, gesturing for the humans to follow. Come, let me show you what my people learned and what they wish they had known sooner. They entered a smaller room filled with devices that hummed softly. The air itself seemed to sparkle with energy. Information flowed through the air like visible streams of light, connecting machines that had no names in any human language. This is where I keep the important knowledge, the curator said. Medical techniques that could cure any disease, energy systems that could power your civilization for millions of years, transportation technology that could take you anywhere in the galaxy instantly. Pete stared at the machines with an engineer's hunger to understand how they worked. This could change everything for humanity. It could, the curator agreed. But knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. My creators had all of this and more. It did not make them happy or peaceful. In the end, it destroyed them. Jake began to understand what the curator was really offering. You want to teach us, not just give us the technology. Exactly. I want to guide your species as you grow. I want to help you avoid the mistakes my people made. But this will take time, patience, and trust from both sides. Lisa looked around the room with wonder. Why us? Why humans instead of the Alari or some other advanced race? The curator's expression became thoughtful. Because you asked the right question. Every other race wanted to know how they could use my power. You asked why I was here and what I wanted. That simple difference shows wisdom that surpasses technical knowledge. The three humans looked at each other, understanding that they were being offered something incredible. The knowledge in this ship could solve most of humanity's problems, but it would also bring new responsibilities and challenges. There's something else, the curator added, his tone becoming serious. My knowledge could also be used to create terrible weapons. Worse than anything that exists now. 17 civilizations have destroyed themselves with my teachings. The question is, can humanity be different? Jake felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about his crew or even his ship. This was about the entire future of the human race. What do you need from us? He asked. The curator smiled again, and this time it was filled with hope. Patience, wisdom, and the promise that you will use what I teach you to help others, not to control them. The curator led Jake, Lisa, and Pete through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. The ship's interior was impossible to understand. Rooms opened into spaces that were bigger than the entire ship appeared from outside. Stairs led up and down at the same time, and windows showed views of places that couldn't exist. Don't try to understand the geometry, the curator advised, noticing their confusion. My creators built this ship using mathematics that your species hasn't discovered yet. Just follow me and trust that we'll get where we need to go. They entered a circular room with walls made of something that looked like crystal but felt warm to the touch. The walls began to glow, showing images that moved like living memories. Every species that has boarded my ship has seen what you are about to see, the curator explained. This is the test that determines whether a race is ready for my knowledge. The walls lit up with scenes from across the galaxy. beautiful worlds covered in cities that reached toward the stars, space stations the size of moons where millions of beings lived in peace, gardens floating in the void between planets tended by machines that thought like poets. My creators built all of this, the curator said with pride in his voice. For 1,000,000 years they brought peace and prosperity to 100 worlds. They ended disease, stopped wars, and taught younger races to reach for the stars. But then the images changed. The same beautiful cities began to crack and crumble. The space stations went dark. The floating gardens withered and died. What happened? Lisa asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. They became proud, the curator replied sadly. They began to believe that their advanced technology made them superior to all other life. They stopped listening to others and started making decisions for entire civilizations without asking what those people wanted. The crystal walls showed armies of machines spreading across planets, forcing the inhabitants to accept improvements to their lives. Beings who refused were relocated or simply eliminated. What had started as help became control, and control became oppression. Some races fought back, the curator continued. My creators saw this as ingratitude and responded with force. They created weapons that could destroy entire solar systems in seconds. They built viruses that could rewrite the genetic code of any living thing. They made machines that could eat planets and turn them into more weapons. Pete watched the images with horror. They became the very thing they had tried to protect people from. Exactly. And in the end, their enemies became desperate enough to use the most terrible weapon of all. The wall showed a device that hurt to look at directly. It seemed to exist in too many dimensions at once, twisting reality around itself like a wound in space. What is that? Jake asked. A weapon that attacks the concept of existence itself, the curator explained. It doesn't just destroy matter or energy. It removes the idea that something ever existed at all. My creators and their enemies used it against each other until nothing remained but empty space where entire civilizations had once thrived. The room fell silent as the humans absorbed what they had seen. The curator watched their faces carefully, looking for their reactions. How did you survive? Lisa asked finally. I was far from the fighting when it began, the curator said. My creators had sent me to explore distant galaxies and search for other intelligent life. By the time I returned, everything was gone. I have spent 3,000 years since then, looking for a species that might do better with the knowledge I carry. The walls changed again, now showing the different races that had found the curator over the centuries. Each scene played out like a test, with the alien visitors faced with moral choices and philosophical questions. The Korax Empire was first, the curator explained as they watched proud warriors examining advanced weapons. I showed them the history of my creators and asked what they would do differently. They said they would use the weapons more efficiently and conquer the galaxy faster. The Zephyrians were more subtle, the curator continued, showing scenes of the genetically perfect aliens studying biological weapons. They claimed they would only improve inferior species for their own good. They could not see that this was exactly how my creator's downfall began. And the Alari? Pete asked. The Alari were the most disappointing of all, the curator said sadly. They were ancient and wise, with knowledge that surpassed most other races. But when I showed them my creator's history, they claimed it was irrelevant. They believed their superior intellect would prevent them from making the same mistakes. The walls now showed human history, but not the sanitized version taught in schools. They saw slavery, genocide, environmental destruction, and wars that killed millions over resources or ideas. Jake felt sick watching some of the worst moments of human civilization. We're no better than the others. Maybe worse, but the curator shook his head. Keep watching. The images changed to show other moments in human history. Scientists who shared their discoveries freely, instead of keeping them secret. Leaders who gave up power voluntarily instead of clinging to it. Ordinary people who risked everything to help strangers they would never meet again. Every species has darkness in its history, the curator said. But humans do something unique. You remember your failures and try to learn from them. You build memorials to your victims and teach your children about your mistakes so they won't repeat them. The walls showed more recent human history, the formation of the United Nations, international cooperation on climate change, the peaceful exploration of space with human crews including members from every nation on Earth. The other races saw their dark history and felt justified or proud, the curator explained. Humans see their dark history and feel ashamed. That shame drives you to be better. Lisa was studying the images with scientific interest. But how do you know we won't make the same mistakes? How do you know we won't become like your creators? I don't, the curator admitted. There is no guarantee. But there are signs that give me hope. The wall showed Jake's own crew aboard their ship, scenes of them working together, making decisions by discussion instead of force, sharing resources equally, and treating alien cultures with respect instead of contempt. Your species explores not to conquer but to understand, the curator said. You seek knowledge not to dominate others but to improve yourselves. You make alliances instead of demanding submission. Pete was still thinking about the terrible weapons they had seen. But what if some humans want to use your knowledge for conquest? Not everyone in our species thinks the way we do. That is the test, the curator replied. Can your species govern itself wisely enough to handle dangerous knowledge? Can you create systems that prevent the misuse of power? The three humans looked at each other, understanding the weight of what was being offered. The knowledge in this ship could solve hunger, disease, and poverty. It could also create weapons that could destroy worlds. What exactly are you asking us? Jake said finally. I am asking humanity to accept responsibility for this knowledge, the curator said. I will teach you gradually, watching how you use each piece of information. If you prove worthy, I will share more. If you prove dangerous, I will leave and continue searching. And if we refuse, Lisa asked, then I will wait. Perhaps another species will find me in time. Perhaps not. I have waited 3,000 years already. I can wait longer. Jake thought about his home planet, about all the problems that advanced technology could solve, about all the good that could be done with this knowledge. He also thought about the images they had seen, civilizations destroyed by their own success. We accept, he said finally, but we want to do this right. We want to learn from your creator's mistakes. The curator smiled, and for the first time since they had met him, he looked truly happy. Then let us begin your education. But remember, knowledge is not just facts and formulas. True knowledge is understanding how to use power wisely. The crystal walls began to glow brighter, filling the room with warm light. The test was over and humanity had passed. But Jake understood that the real test was just beginning. The curator led them to a new room that felt different from the others. This space was smaller and more comfortable, with chairs that seemed to form themselves from the floor when the humans needed somewhere to sit. The walls here showed peaceful scenes from across the galaxy, sunsets on distant worlds, creatures playing in alien oceans, and cities where different species lived together in harmony. This is where I make my most important decisions, the curator explained, as they settled into the strange but comfortable chairs. Here I choose whether to share my knowledge or to continue waiting. Jake looked around the room and noticed something that hadn't been there before. Floating in the air near the center of the room was a crystal sphere about the size of a basketball. Inside it, lights moved like living thoughts, connecting and separating in patterns too complex to follow. What is that? Lisa asked, pointing at the sphere. That is my core memory, the curator replied. Everything my creators knew is stored in there. The cure for every disease, the solution to every energy problem, the secret of traveling between stars without the dangerous jump gates your species uses, but also the knowledge to create weapons that could crack planets in half. Pete stared at the sphere with a mixture of wonder and fear. All of that in something so small? Size is not important when dealing with compressed information, the curator said. What matters is how that information is used. The curator walked over to stand beside the sphere, his form flickering slightly as he moved. I have made my decision. I will share my knowledge with humanity, but there are conditions that cannot be changed. What conditions? Jake asked, though he had a feeling he already knew some of them. First, the knowledge will be shared slowly. Your species must prove itself worthy of each advancement before receiving the next. This process cannot be rushed. The curator gestured, and the walls showed images of human cities. But these were not the cities that existed now. These were visions of what Earth could become with advanced technology. Clean energy powering everything, diseases eliminated, hunger ended, and the environment restored to perfect health. Second, the knowledge must be shared freely among all humans. It cannot be hoarded by one nation or group. If I detect that some humans are using my gifts to dominate others, I will leave immediately. Lisa nodded. That makes sense. Knowledge this powerful could create terrible inequality if only some people had access to it. Third, and most important, the curator continued, Humanity must promise to use this knowledge to help other species, not to conquer them. You must become teachers and healers, not rulers. The images on the walls changed to show human ships traveling between stars. But these ships carried doctors and scientists instead of soldiers. They showed humans working with alien races to solve problems, sharing Earth's knowledge while learning from other cultures. Can you make that promise for your entire species? The curator asked Jake directly. Jake felt the weight of the question. He was just one ship captain from one small planet. How could he promise anything for all of humanity? I can't speak for everyone, Jake said honestly, but I can promise that we'll do everything in our power to make sure this knowledge is used wisely. We'll create systems and safeguards to prevent misuse. That is all I can ask, the curator replied. No species is perfect, but humanity has shown the capacity for wisdom and growth. That is enough for me to take this risk. The sphere in the center of the room began to glow brighter. As it did, the curator's form became more solid, more real-looking. I will begin with the simplest gifts, he explained. Medical knowledge that can eliminate genetic diseases. Agricultural techniques that can end world hunger. Clean energy systems that will let you abandon fossil fuels forever. Pete leaned forward eagerly. How long will it take to learn these things? For the first gifts, perhaps 6 months, the curator replied. But understand that each piece of knowledge comes with lessons about responsibility. You must learn not just how to cure a disease, but also how to distribute that cure fairly. You must learn not just how to grow more food, but also how to do it without harming the environment. The walls around them began to show detailed diagrams and formulas. Information flowed through the air in streams of light, organizing itself into categories that somehow made sense even though the humans couldn't read the alien symbols. I will establish a connection with Earth, the curator continued. Selected human scientists will be able to access this information gradually, but they must prove their wisdom with each level before advancing to the next. Lisa was already taking notes, trying to capture as much as she could.
How will you judge whether we're ready for more advanced knowledge?
I will watch, the curator said simply. I will observe how you use what I give you. Do you share it freely or try to profit from it? Do you use it to help the weak or to make the strong stronger? Do you remember the lessons about humility and cooperation? The sphere pulsed with light, and suddenly Jake felt a strange sensation in his mind. It wasn't painful, but it was definitely alien. Information seemed to be downloading directly into his brain, but not in any language he recognized. I am creating a permanent connection between myself and selected humans, the curator explained. You three will be my primary contacts. Through you, I will monitor humanity's progress and guide your species' development. What does that mean exactly? Pete asked, looking nervous about having an alien intelligence connected to his mind. It means I will always be able to communicate with you, no matter where you are in the galaxy, the curator replied. You will become ambassadors between your species and me, but do not worry. I will not control your thoughts or change who you are. Jake felt the connection stabilize in his mind. It was like having a very quiet voice in the back of his thoughts, one that only spoke when he wanted it to. There is something else, the curator said, his tone becoming more serious. Other species in the galaxy will react strongly when they learn that humans have gained access to my knowledge. Some will be curious, some will be jealous, some will be afraid. The wall showed images of different alien governments and military forces, war fleets gathering, diplomatic meetings filled with angry voices, and trade routes being redirected away from human space. The Galactic Council has been trying to claim me for centuries, the curator continued. When they learn that a primitive species like humanity has succeeded where they failed, there will be consequences. Lisa looked worried. What kind of consequences? Political pressure, economic sanctions, possibly even military action, the curator replied honestly. Not all species will accept that humans deserve access to advanced knowledge. But you'll protect us, right? Pete asked. The curator shook his head slowly. I will defend myself and this ship, but I cannot fight humanity's battles for you. That would make you dependent on me, and dependence leads to the same problems that destroyed my creators. Jake understood. You want us to be strong enough to stand on our own? Exactly. The knowledge I give you will help, but ultimately humanity must prove itself worthy through its own actions and choices. The sphere in the center of the room pulsed again, and this time all three humans felt information flowing into their minds, medical formulas, Energy equations and agricultural techniques began to organize themselves in their thoughts. "This is just the beginning," the curator said. "The first lesson package. Use it well and I will give you more." Jake stood up, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "What happens now?" "Now you return to your people and begin the great work," the curator replied. "Transform your world with the gifts I have given you. Show the galaxy that humans can handle advanced knowledge responsibly. Prove that your species deserves a place among the truly civilized races." As they prepared to leave, the curator had one final message. "Remember, Jake Morrison, Lisa Park, Pete Graham, you are no longer just explorers. You are now the bridge between humanity and the greatest knowledge in the galaxy. Use that position wisely." The three humans walked back toward their shuttle, their minds spinning with new information and possibilities. Behind them, the curator watched with hope and concern, knowing that he had just set in motion changes that would reshape the entire galaxy. 6 months after their first meeting with the curator, the world had changed in ways that nobody could have imagined. The alien ship, now called the Heritage by human crews, floated in orbit around Earth like a second moon. Every day, thousands of people looked up at the sky and saw proof that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. Dr. Lisa Park stood in her new laboratory aboard the Heritage, working alongside scientists from every nation on Earth. The medical advances they had developed using the curator's knowledge had already eliminated 3 genetic diseases and provided new treatments for cancer that were 90% more effective than anything that had existed before. "The protein synthesis is complete," announced Dr. Chen Wei, a biochemist from Beijing, who had been selected as one of the 12 primary researchers. "This batch should be enough to treat 10,000 patients." Lisa smiled as she watched the medicine being prepared. The curator had been true to his word about sharing knowledge gradually. Each breakthrough came with lessons about distribution and ethics. They had learned not just how to create miracle cures, but also how to make sure those cures reached people who needed them regardless of their ability to pay. Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Pete Graham was working in a different section of the ship, with teams of engineers from around the world. They had just finished building Earth's first fusion power plant using the curator's clean energy designs. The plant would provide enough electricity for an entire city without producing any pollution or radioactive waste. "The magnetic containment field is stable," reported Maria Santos, an engineer from Brazil. "We're getting 97% efficiency just like the curator predicted." Pete nodded with satisfaction. "And the best part is, all the plans are being shared freely with every country on Earth. No one nation can use this technology to dominate the others." This had been one of the hardest lessons for humanity to learn. Some governments had wanted to keep the new technology secret, to gain military or economic advantages over their neighbors. But the curator had been firm. Either everyone got access to the knowledge or no one did. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to admiral, was dealing with a different kind of challenge. He stood in the Heritage's communication center, speaking with representatives from the Galactic Council, who had finally agreed to meet with humanity. The main screen showed 5 different alien species, each looking uncomfortable in their own way. The Corax delegate was a fierce warrior with scars covering his face. The Zephyrian representative was perfectly beautiful, with golden skin and no visible flaws. The Ilari ambassador appeared as a shimmering cloud of energy that occasionally took a vaguely humanoid shape. "This situation is unacceptable," the Corax delegate growled through his translator. "A primitive species like humanity has no right to possess such advanced technology." Jake kept his voice calm and respectful. "With respect, General Thrax, we didn't take this technology by force. It was offered to us freely." The Zephyrian delegate leaned forward, her perfect features showing confusion. "But that makes no sense. The Void Caller has destroyed our ships for centuries. Why would it choose humans over more advanced species?" Before Jake could answer, the curator materialized in the communication room. His appearance caused all 5 alien delegates to lean back in surprise. "I chose humanity because they passed the test that your species failed," the curator said simply. "They approached me with curiosity instead of greed, and humility instead of arrogance." The Ilari ambassador's energy form pulsed with what might have been anger. "Humility? These beings have barely mastered spaceflight. They are children playing with forces they cannot understand." "Perhaps," the curator replied, "but children can learn and grow. Adults who believe they already know everything rarely improve. Jake watched the alien delegates process this information. He could see that some of them were beginning to understand while others remained hostile. "What do you want from us?" asked the fifth delegate, an insect-like being from a species called the Hive. "Nothing," Jake replied, surprising them all. "We don't want to rule anyone or take anything from anyone. We want to learn, to explore, and to help where we can." The curator nodded approvingly. Humanity has proposed something unprecedented in galactic history. They wish to serve as neutral mediators in conflicts, using the Heritage's advanced sensors and my knowledge to help resolve disputes peacefully. This caused an uproar among the alien delegates. The Corax general slammed his fist on his table. "Mediation? From a species that still fights wars on their own planet?" "Exactly because we fight wars," Jake replied calmly. "We understand the cost of conflict. We know what it's like to struggle with differences between nations, religions, and ideologies. That experience makes us uniquely qualified to help others find peaceful solutions." Dr. Park joined the conversation from her laboratory, her image appearing on a side screen. "We're not claiming to be perfect. We're offering to share what we've learned from our mistakes." The Ilari ambassador's form shifted and swirled. "And what makes you think other species will accept human mediation?" "Because we're not trying to impose our will on anyone," Lisa replied. "We're offering tools and knowledge to help people solve their own problems." To demonstrate this, the curator activated a holographic display showing the Heritage's recent activities. They had helped negotiate a trade dispute between two mineral-rich worlds. They had provided clean energy technology to a planet suffering from industrial pollution. They had even helped design a communication system that allowed two species with completely different languages to understand each other for the first time. In every case, the curator explained, humans worked with all parties involved to find solutions that benefited everyone. They did not demand payment or political concessions. They simply helped because help was needed. The meeting continued for several more hours, with the alien delegates asking increasingly detailed questions about humanity's intentions and capabilities. Some remained skeptical, but others began to see the value in having a truly neutral party available to help with galactic problems. Finally, the Corax general asked the question that everyone had been thinking. What happens if humans become corrupted by all this power? What if they decide to become conquerors like every other species that gains advanced technology? Jake looked directly at the general through the screen. Then the curator will leave and we'll lose everything we've gained. But more importantly, we'll lose the trust of every species in the galaxy. We understand that our actions now will determine how our children and grandchildren are treated by the galactic community. The curator added his own perspective. I have established monitoring systems that will alert me to any misuse of the knowledge I've shared. But beyond that, I believe humanity's own moral development will prevent such corruption. They have shown remarkable growth in just 6 months. When the meeting finally ended, 3 of the 5 species had agreed to formal diplomatic relations with Earth. The Corax and 1 other species remained hostile, but even they had agreed to observe humanity's actions before making final judgments. Later that evening, Jake stood on the Heritage's observation deck with Lisa and Pete, looking down at Earth. The planet below them showed signs of the changes that had already begun. City lights were brighter because of the new fusion plants, but there was less pollution in the atmosphere. Ocean levels had begun to stabilize as new technologies reduced global warming. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Lisa asked quietly. Pete answered first. "A year ago, my daughter had a genetic condition that would have killed her before she turned 20. Now she's completely healthy because of medicines we learned to make from the curator. How can that not be right?" "It's not just about the technology," Jake said thoughtfully. "It's about what we're becoming as a species. We're learning to work together in ways we never did before." The curator appeared beside them, his form more solid and human-like than it had been when they first met him. "You are learning the most important lesson of all," he said. "True advancement is not about building better weapons or faster ships. It's about building better societies and wiser people." Above them, the stars shone with new possibilities. Human ships were already being built with curator-enhanced technology, ready to explore distant worlds not as conquerors, but as friends. And on worlds throughout the galaxy, other species were beginning to reconsider their assumptions about the value of wisdom over strength. The Hazardous Starship that had rejected every alien Species for 3,000 years had finally found its purpose. It would help humanity become not the rulers of the galaxy, but its teachers, healers, and peacemakers. What happens next? Pete asked. The curator smiled, an expression that had become more natural for him over the past months. Next, we continue learning together. There is so much knowledge yet to share, so many problems to solve, so many species to help, and humanity will lead the way. Not through conquest, but through the simple revolutionary idea that the strongest person is the one who lifts others up. As they watched, a shooting star streaked across Earth's sky below them. But Jake knew it wasn't really a star. It was one of the new human exploration ships, heading out to make contact with another species that had never known friendship from the stars. The age of human isolation was over. The age